Okay, so we're joined today, Southwest Boxing Media, Scott and Kieran, with the legend that is John from BT Sport. John, you're in the bubble again. Is this something that you've grown accustomed to? Are you enjoying it, or are you like us? Are you eager to get normal boxing life back to normal?
Well, of course, you hope for a return to normality, don't you? I mean, there's nothing very exciting about sitting in a hotel room for 24 hours waiting to be cleared by a COVID test. I mean, you catch up on your reading, you do your preparation for the show at the weekend, and just try and keep yourself amused as best you can. Sit on Twitter, trying not to upset too many people.
I have seen. Obviously, you're quite active on Twitter. I've been waiting for somebody to sort of bite. You know what the people are like on Twitter these days.
Well, I mean, I think as long as you don't take it too seriously, I try not to go into certain areas. I mean, it's pretty self-evident the sort of areas which can potentially get you into trouble, and I just try and talk honestly about whatever subject it may be, usually sport, and usually boxing. And I find that most of the people you engage with are pretty positive, and the ones who aren't, you don't have to reply to them if you don't choose to. That's the way it works. I think it's a mistake when people get too wound up about social media. I mean, you have to realise that one of the reasons we don't have graffiti on toilet walls anymore is that it's all on social media. So you just don't have to necessarily take everything desperately seriously.
While on the discussion of social media, John, I want to get your thoughts on Mr. Tyson Fury. He tried to withdraw his name from the BBC Sports Personality of the Year sometime this afternoon. What was your thoughts on that, mate?
Well, I'm not surprised, to be honest. I mean, I thought he would make a very good Sports Personality of the Year if he got it, but at the same time, last time he was in the show, it was one of the factors behind his breakdown, effectively, from 2015 onwards. And I think the vitriol which he got from various quarters actually propelled him towards the breakdown and the drug abuse and the massive weight gain and really a pretty classic case of depression, which mercifully he's recovered from. And I don't think Tyson, understandably, wants to put himself into the situation where everybody thinks he's public property and is able to dredge up old stories and old things which he might have said and which he would believe that he's put behind him and moved on, which of course he has. And I think that I respect him when he says that he's the champion of those who want him to be their champion. And I think there's a vast number of people who look at Tyson Fury and say, yeah, what he's done over the last couple of years is quite remarkable. And I have to say, I'm one of them.
Yeah, to agree, mate. He's like you said, John, he certainly is the people's champion, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He is. And if you probably know people who suffer from mental illness or depression of some sort. I know I do. And they've said to me that Tyson speaks more sense regarding their problems, their difficulties, than any specialist that they've heard from. And he's communicated to a whole load of people. And I think given them a sense that they're not alone, and also a belief that from their current difficulties, there is a way ahead. And I think Tyson has done extraordinarily good things from that point of view.
Definitely, mate. Yeah. So before John, before we move on, obviously, to this weekend's boxing, I'd love to get your thoughts on last weekend's boxing. Obviously, Joyce Dubois was definitely lived up to the expectations for us fans. It's been a great fight. I mean, what was your thoughts, John? Did you thoroughly enjoy it as well, or I mean, how did you take it?
Well, it was a tremendous fight, wasn't it? I mean, it was what we, to an extent, it was what we expected. I never bought into the idea that it was just going to be the Daniel Dubois blowout, because I always had a feeling that the fight was going to go long. And of course, if it did, the more it was going to play into Joe Joyce's hands, and so it turned out. I think looking at it, obviously you have sympathy with Daniel for getting the injury that he had, and also the condemnation in some cases from people who I think possibly should know better, and he's got to live with that and all the emotional baggage which is going to come with it now, of people saying, "Oh, once a quitter, always a quitter," and all that sort of stuff. But I believe he can come again. And yeah, of course, I mean, he took a knee. So, you call it what you like. Quit is a damning word in boxing. But, he took the knee and therefore by his own decision decided that he was going to play no further part in the fight. But what I've subsequently found out is that his corner had told him, if you don't go out there and knock him out, we're going to pull you out. It had reached that stage, and he'd been told that when they were whispering in the corner. That was what he was being told. But also, my take on what I feel sorry about from last weekend, great fight though it was, is that Joe Joyce, who got his tactics from his perspective absolutely spot on, I don't believe he's quite got the credit that he deserves for a very, very good performance indeed.
Yeah, because I mean that jab of his in particular, it was just clinical. He just couldn't miss the target with that jab, because he was so clinical.
Well, and he's such a big unit, isn't he? People talk about what about the future. Well, the future may well be Alexander Usyk if AJ has to release the title to fight Tyson Fury. That might be the case with it being declared vacant, and Usyk as the #1 challenger would in all probability be asked to fight Joe Joyce. I think Joyce has got a chance against Usyk. I really do. I hear people say Usyk's difficult, he's awkward, he's got speed, movement, mobility, but is he a genuine heavyweight? And I think that question still has to be asked. And one thing you can certainly say is that Joe, with his size, his jab, and his ability to take a shot, most definitely is a genuine heavyweight. So I think there's a lot of talking points if that fight gets made.
There's been so many different opinions on, how people had it up until that 10th round on Saturday evening. How were you personally scoring up until that point, John?
Well, I checked back afterwards. Richie, I know, had Daniel marginally ahead. And I, by the same margin, I had Joe 1 point ahead as they went into the 10th round. So, yeah, I think five points or whatever it is that one of the judges had in Daniel's favour has to go down as a fairly strange piece of judging. But it was close, and I think Joe would recognise that, and I think Daniel would recognise that. It was close at that stage, but the telling factor was the jab and the way in which it had damaged Daniel's eye. That injury was pretty awful, and we won't actually know properly until next week, once the swelling's gone down and he's gone back to see his Harley Street specialist. We won't know until then just what the long-term prognostication is going to be, whether he's going to need surgery, and indeed how long he's likely to be away from training and from sparring.
We sort of touched on the word quit there, John. What's your take on fans' views? Me and Kieran have spoke about it, and we've said, we don't feel like we've got the right to say that a boxer's quit when we have never even, and never will box anywhere near that level. Do you think fans have the right to say that word, or do you think it should just be, for the elite professional fighters to even utter the words quit?
Well, it goes with the territory, doesn't it? With when you're watching professional boxing, and indeed when you're in the media limelight, as I am, you sometimes have to take criticism and respect people's right to have it. Just because somebody doesn't earn a living from boxing, it doesn't mean to say that they don't have considerable knowledge about it, and through having watched a hell of a lot of boxing, that they are qualified to make some sort of a statement about it. I think fighters, obviously, who've been in the ring know a great deal more about it. But if you've watched a huge amount of boxing from ringside, as I have for the last 30 odd years, I'd reckon that I know a little bit about it. I think probably if you're close to the fighters and close to the fight, you're more qualified to have an opinion than if you've just watched on television and all you're doing is firing off opinions through your keyboard and are effectively just a keyboard warrior. But having said that, I think that people who know their boxing, their opinion, merits respect.
Yeah, I mean, as well as the sort of negativity over social media aimed at Daniel, it's been nice to see as well a few positive sort of people reaching out. I mean, we saw Anthony Ogogo, who's been through, obviously problems with his eye himself, had to unfortunately retire. And I think we saw AJ as well reached out today and offered some, support to Daniel. I mean, that's been nice to see as well, John, hasn't it?
Well, AJ probably thinks when he looks back at that Ruiz fight, what did I do? Effectively, he didn't continue when possibly he could have done. What about Mike Tyson when he bit Evander Holyfield's ear? That was. I remember at the time that his trainer, his former trainer, what's he called, the guy with the scar down his face, he said to me that it was a street way of getting out of the fight. He was quitting in what he was viewed on the street among his peers as being a macho way to get out. But what he was actually doing was quitting nevertheless. It was Tyson's way of getting out of the fight and not being beaten for a second time.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Before we move on, John, I got to say the undercard I thought was equally as entertaining, with some amazing prospects. When you think of Hamza Shiraz, Louis Lind I thought was fantastic, and David Adele. I mean, those three are very exciting fighters coming through, and it's great to see, John, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, don't put too great a burden of expectation around their shoulders, because they're still young, they're still relatively inexperienced. But the three names you mentioned there, they all did really well, and they came through and did what they had to do, and got good sort of learning experience behind them on a high profile bill. And from that point of view, for the three guys you mentioned, it was pretty impressive. I thought they did very well.
Right, John, let's get on to this weekend's action that we're very much looking forward to. Many see this as another 50-50 fight, the main event between Anthony Yarde and Lyndon Arthur. How do you see it, John? What's your thoughts on that fight? Very exciting.
Well, I'm not going to say who I think is going to win. I'll say that at the outset, because I think that wouldn't be right. I mean, I'm supposed to maintain a little bit of neutrality and not be looking to sort of favour one person over another. But I'll tell you what the factors are. Lyndon Arthur has got a fabulous jab. He really has got a very good jab.
We saw that against Deck Spellman, didn't we? I mean, it looked immense. That jab against Deck was fantastic.
Yeah, he was brilliant. And talking to Deck, as we have done in the run-up to this, Deck says that he thinks that if Lyndon Arthur maintains his mobility, keeps the fight long, and utilises the jab, then he sees it as quite possible that Lyndon Arthur wins on points. And that is one very possible scenario. I think if he's going to win it, the fight's going to have to go long, and he's going to have to find a way, as Joe Joyce did, to negate the Anthony Yarde power. Tunde Ajayi said to me, well, don't just think that Anthony is just a power merchant, because he isn't. He says he can box as well, and that they will find a way to get to Lyndon Arthur. And he also said if he wants to finish it in 4 rounds, then in 4 rounds he will finish it. I mean, that's a typically sort of brash Tunde way of looking at it, isn't it? But having said that, you've got the power on one side of Anthony Yarde and the boxing ability of Lyndon Arthur. Neither of them has been beaten. Both of them think they're going to win the fight. There's a huge amount on the line because the WBO title has been declared vacant, so they might well be put into some sort of mandatory challenger spot and fighting for the title, which has been vacated by Canelo. Whoever gets the win might be getting into a position to fight for a world title once again.
I mean, you sort of touch on, like you said, there's a bit of a parallel, isn't it, between Joyce Dubois and obviously Arthur and Yarde there. Do you think, though, that the fact that Yarde has fought the likes of Kovalev, for the world title, do you think maybe gives him a sort of edge over Arthur, the fact he's got that sort of world level experience?
I'm not sure that's the case because, he went into world level and came up short.
Yeah.
Yes, in that 8th round, he almost got there, didn't he? But I think if they could review the fight and do it again, he'll have learned from the experience. But if they could do it again, I think they'd probably admit that they should have gone for it as they did in the 8th round earlier in the fight when Anthony had more left in the tank. And in that case, it might well have been a different scenario. So, yeah, I mean, he's been and fought at a very high level in another guy's backyard. And from that point of view, he's going to be stronger and wiser. But does that give him the edge over Lyndon Arthur? Well, the answer to that is not necessarily.
Is the only shame in these exciting sort of 50-50 fights, and I mean the two shows that Frank has delivered, I mean the weekend coming up now and last weekend, is the only shame that fans are not going to be there to see it, John? I mean the sort of I was there moments the fans could turn and say they're not going to be able to now. Is that the only shame in all this, would you say?
Well, yeah, of course it's a shame because there's nothing quite like being there at ringside, is there? I mean, it's that makes for something very special. But I think it's all credit to the fighters for actually being prepared to risk so much behind closed doors, and of course get a fair payday in the process. We all of us want to get paid and want to earn a living, and I think it's also a lot of tribute to Frank Warren and his 40-year anniversary as a promoter, that he's putting on fights of this sort of stature as main events. He's not protecting people, he's putting them out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as well as the main event, one of the fights that Kieran and myself are both looking forward to is obviously Willie Hutchinson versus Lennox Clark for the British super middleweight title.
I'm afraid you're going to be looking forward to that one for a while because it's off.
Really?
Oh, really?
So I'm told. I don't know any details as to why, but I know the fight's not going ahead.
That's a big shame.
Yeah, I mean, we really big fans of Willie Hutchinson. We, obviously hailing from the Ingle gym, we think he's got quite a bright future ahead of him, and we were hoping, that this British title would have sort of pushed him forward, John.
Well, very bright future, and I know Dominic Ingle thinks an awful lot of him. He's managed by Shelley Finkel, who doesn't generally get involved with bums, and Willie's done everything right so far. He looks the real deal to me, and I think he's going to go all the way. I think he's in the next 3 or 4 years. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he winds up fighting for a world title and indeed winning one. There are, I mean, I said earlier, you shouldn't put a great burden of expectation around young prospects' heads. And here I am doing precisely that. But, you're looking for a guy who's potentially going to be kind of a new Joe Calzaghe type figure. And Willie might be the man. He could be the man. Time will tell, but I think he's very, very good.
I'm going to ask you to blow smoke up another prospect now. Sorry, John. We've got to talk about him. Dennis McCann. He's regarded as one of the most, well, possibly the most exciting prospect in the UK at the moment. How quickly do you see him moving through the levels and Frank pushing him on, personally?
Well, they'll try not to do that, and I don't think he will be pushed on too quickly, because that would obviously be a mistake. He's only had 7 fights, and he's still a young fella and still having to gain experience. But it's difficult, because the problem he's got is that most people will have seen him on television, and they see how unorthodox and how difficult he is, and the fact that he can bang. And most people are not going to be interested in going in with him. And at bantamweight, domestically, there aren't too many options, hence he's having to go fighting people from abroad, like his Portuguese opponent tomorrow. And so they have to be careful, and it's viewing what he's producing in the gym as well as what he's producing actually in competitive fights. And Alan Smith, his trainer, plays a very, very important role there, actually trying to educate him in the various facets that he's going to need when he moves on to world level.
Yeah. Before we let you go, John, and enjoy the rest of Bubble Life, we've got to touch on.
It's so much fun.
I can tell. We've got to. I was just hoping to, possibly pay tribute. You touched on it previously, just there. Frank Warren, 40 years in boxing, a feat that not many, will, be able to say that they've done, apart from Bob Arum, obviously, who feels like he's been around forever. But I mean, Frank Warren, definitely a legend of the game, isn't he, Frank? Isn't he, John? And 40 years in the sport is an amazing achievement, isn't it?
I think it's a wonderful achievement. He broke what was called the cartel back in 1980, but prior to then, the sport was dominated by the Jarvis Astaire, Mickey Duff, Terry Lawless group, with everything going out on BBC television. And it was very difficult for anybody who wasn't involved in that little setup to get a look in. What Frank did was go and put fights on with ITV. His first ever fight was at the Bloomsbury Crest Hotel on December the 1st, 1980, and he lost £17,500 in the process, which at the time was a lot of money. But of course, it turned out to be an investment which was well made, because he redefined the landscape of boxing in this country, first of all making ITV the dominant players, and then when he moved to Sky Sports in 1995, was it thereabouts? He went and sort of launched effectively satellite television as a major player in the British sport. And aside from all that, that's TV politics, which most people will be looking at this saying, "Oh, give it a rest shot," don't care. But what he has done over those years is put on so many fantastic fights. And we talked earlier on about Tyson Fury. Tyson was pretty much on the scrappy. I don't think too many people would have gone and risked their reputation on backing Tyson Fury, but that's what Frank did. And he is by nature a gambler, if you like, but a successful gambler. And he stakes his reputation on fighters and fights again and again. He doesn't always get it right, but very often he does get it right. And he's had some amazing stars over the years. He helped Frank Bruno achieve his dream of becoming world champion by fighting Oliver McCall. Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank at the back end of his career, Nazim Hamed, Ricky Hatton,
Joe Kozagi, yeah.
Yeah, Joe, well, we'd already mentioned Joe. I mean, Joe's the biggest, arguably the biggest success story of them all, undefeated. Yeah. And when you look back at his career, he did virtually everything. And these are all Frank Warren successes. And I think that your average fight fan maybe ought to just button their lip when they come to throwing abuse in that particular direction, because I think as British fight fans, we have a hell of a lot to be grateful for.
Definitely. Well, John, on behalf of Southwest Boxing Media and obviously Kieran and myself, we'd like to thank you for your time today. And we really hope you enjoy the rest of Bubble Life, as I'm sure you will. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much. And nice to meet you.
Thanks, John. Have a good evening. Take care. Bye.